All right, everybody. Welcome to Finding the Guardian of Your Soul. I'm Lisa Shield, and I am here to help you find a relationship with an amazing man who sees who your soul is and what your soul is longing for in this lifetime. And I can show you how to find him, a man who will support your soul's journey so that you can become all of who you dream of being in this lifetime. So let's talk about our topic today, the high price you pay for trying to fix or change men. So I want you to think about all the years you spent in relationships where you tried to fix a partner. Maybe you had the same arguments over and over again. Maybe there was some reoccurring issue, and eventually you realized that you were stuck, that you were just going in circles, talking about the same thing over and over and over again and getting nowhere. I did this in my first marriage. I was with my husband, my ex-husband, for a total of 13 years. And the very same issues about money that were issues when we first met were the same issues that got us in the end. And if I had been paying attention and I had known what I was doing, I would have been able to get out of that relationship so much earlier. And we do this. We stay in these relationships for so many reasons. You know, we hold on to the hope that these men will change, and they don't. Nothing changes. Many smart, successful women fall into this trap. You could be successful in every other part of your life. You could have the most successful relationships and all, but when it comes to men and love and romance,
for some reason, we find a person and we think, well, I'm flawed and I want him to be patient with me as I figure out my life. So I need to do the same for him while he figures out his life. And often looking back, we chose these people. We chose a person who we knew was a fixer-upper, who we knew didn't have his life together, and we made excuses for that person. Maybe we didn't have our own lives together, and so we thought, well, I'm not so perfect either. And that's exactly what I know I did with my first husband. I was struggling in my own life. I was trying to find myself and figure out who I was. I also had struggled in relationships, just attracting a man that I really got along with and saw a future with. And so my first husband, in some ways, he was the best I could do at the time, based on my level of self-esteem and self-awareness. And if you look back, you may find that you were in a similar situation. Emotionally naked dating is the work that I do. It's the program that I teach. And one of the things we know is that true love, real, healthy, loving relationships where two people grow together and inspire each other to be their best selves, what we call guardian of your soul relationships. It requires looking at relationships honestly, without illusions, so you can see both your partner's truth and your own. And in this talk, what I want to do is I want to explore with you how trying or picking a partner that going into that relationship is somebody that you feel you need to fix or change. It really undermines the entire relationship from the very start. It is going to set you up to fail because two people coming into a relationship, I know I don't want to feel like my partner wants to fix me or change me. I know I'm not perfect and I want to be supported as I grow and learn and work through issues and problems in my life, but I don't want my partner to see me as his project, and you shouldn't be entering into a relationship where you see your partner as a project. So underneath fixing, this whole idea of picking a fixer-upper or settling for somebody who we know really isn't the kind of person we want to be with, there can be codependency. When I look back on my relationship with my ex-husband, I realized that we were extremely codependent with each other. So when you take a step back and you look at your past relationships, you may realize that you were focusing on your partner's flaws because you didn't want to look at your own flaws. So think about that, because that's really what I did with my ex-husband. I don't think this was intentional. Of course, we don't go into these relationships saying, well, I'm so perfect and I have it all figured out and I'm going to take this guy who has potential and make him into the guy that I think, he could be. Many of us in a codependent relationships are based on needing and being needed. So they're dependent relationships. One of the things that made me feel safe in past relationships, and you may be doing or have done the same thing, when you are codependent, you go into a relationship where you both need each other and you're needy. You depend on each other. You're needy, right? You're using your partner to fill holes in your soul and you're trying to fill a hole in his soul. And based on my history and based on your history, if you have any kind of addiction in your past, if your parents had addiction issues, if you had siblings who had addiction issues, if you have or had addiction issues, codependency is another form of addiction. It's just a people addiction. It's an addiction to needing another person, relying in unhealthy ways on other people to fill your needs. And my ex-husband did that for me. He filled needs that I didn't even know I had until I was able to get out of that relationship. And in hindsight, I was able to see how dependent I was on him just to get by in my life. I was leaning on him for companionship, for support, to feel like I was important in someone's life. In my codependency, I needed to feel needed. And part of how I made myself feel needed was by thinking that I could be his coach and his, mother, his mentor. I could, try to fix him. And that made me feel like he needed me. And he also needed me for money. He had terrible financial issues. And I knew that going into the relationship. In fact, those were the very issues from the start that wound up sabotaging the relationship in the end, was that I knew he was terrible with money and that he had real money issues and that I had money. And so I knew that he needed me financially to support him, to support us, even though I resented him for that and I wanted him to get his act together. It was also, I set this up from the very beginning in our relationship. I didn't pick a partner who had his act together financially. I chose a partner who had money issues, and then I tried to fix those issues for him and get him to get his finances in order, and he never did. And so the very issues that we started out with were the same issues that we ended with. Looking at this part of your life, why you pick fixer-uppers, why you settle for men who are not on your level, why you want a man who needs you so that you can feel needed in your relationship. Look, we all want to feel that we need each other. We need each other emotionally. We need support. We need love. We need attention and affection. There are very healthy needs that any two people have, any two adults have and fulfill for each other in a romantic relationship. It's not the same being alone as having the affection, the touch, the holding, the physical connection that I get with my husband. I wouldn't get that need filled from my girlfriends or from my siblings. That is something, a need that I have for affection and touch that I get from my partner, from my husband. So there are very real needs. I need support from my husband. I need him to believe in me, to encourage me. I need to be able to talk to him about things that are going on in my life and know that I have a friend and a partner when I'm struggling and I need a shoulder to lean on. These are healthy needs. What isn't healthy is when two people are not showing up in their lives and they're leaning on each other and they're pulling each other down or keeping each other stuck. And what that does is it leads to stagnation in the relationship. Neither person really grows because you're not focusing on growing and developing yourself. You're focusing on each other's flaws at the expense of doing your own work. And that's exactly what I know I did in my first marriage. I didn't work on myself. I didn't take responsibility for the ways in which my life wasn't working. My career wasn't successful. I wasn't getting ahead in my own life. But I blamed part of that on my ex-husband because I felt like he was pulling me down. The truth was, we were pulling each other down. We were holding each other back. And maybe you've done this in your relationships too, where you were supporting your partner financially to your own detriment, and you weren't looking at why you did that. Maybe you told yourself it was because you loved him and that you were trying to get him to get out and get a job or ask for a raise or become a responsible adult. But these are things that we all have to learn and do for ourselves. I know that people in relationships can have hardships, like during the pandemic. I had a remote business and my husband is a body worker. So he touches people for a living. And during the pandemic, his work shut down overnight, just from day to night, because he could no longer be in close physical proximity to his patients. And so I had to pick up the slack for us, but that isn't the same as being codependent. What would have been codependency is if my husband wasn't seeking new patients and his practice was dwindling over many years and he just wasn't finding ways to grow his practice, and I was having to compensate for that. That would be codependency. So what is the impact on a man when a woman tries to fix or change him? This is a big thing. And many women think they're being helpful and supportive and trying to be a great partner in doing this. I know I felt some of those things with my ex-husband, but when a woman tries to fix or improve a man, it can feel to the man like she's taking on the role of his mother or his boss or his teacher. And these are not sexy roles for you to be putting yourself in. It really takes the romance out of a romance when you set yourself up to be your husband's teacher. And you start to create this hierarchy where you think that you're above him and you're going to help him or elevate him, and you're going to teach him how to be a man. So instead of the man being seen as your equal, as an equal partner, he starts to feel like he's constantly being evaluated or corrected. And that can feel deeply emasculating to a man. Even if you're right, even if what you're doing or you have the best of intentions, right? Even if you're talking about something that you really know something about. Maybe it's the work you do in the world and you're trying to help elevate him in that area. The worst thing you can do as his romantic partner is try to set yourself up as his teacher, especially if he hasn't asked you to do that. And what happens when you set up that dynamic is that you communicate to him that he's not good enough the way he is. And that erodes his self-esteem and it creates resentment. So this is a really, really, really bad negative spiral in the relationship. And it's one that can feel very hard to recover from if this is something you're doing. Even if you're being helpful, even if you think that you're right about what you're saying and doing. And so men often feel valued and appreciated when they're seen as being capable and respected partners. So when a man feels, that you think he's capable and you show respect for him, that's when you're going to motivate him, right? Now, this can be a catch-22 because if you keep doing that and he's really struggling in a particular area, it can also feel awful for the guy if he knows he's falling down in this area and you're trying to pump him up. It can feel fake. if you do too much of that. So there's a very fine balance with this, because he also may feel like you're trying to placate him or, be his cheerleader when things just aren't going well. So when the relationship starts to feel like a project, he feels shamed rather than supported. And this creates an uncomfortable power imbalance in the relationship, where you unintentionally take on an authority role rather than being a partner. And this just isn't, again, it's not sexy. It erodes the romance and the passion, and it doesn't make your man feel like a man. So when he's under constant scrutiny, he may withdraw emotionally or become defensive, and it really will create a breakdown in the safety and trust in the relationship. And what will eventually suffer is your sexual connection. So in emotionally naked dating, I encourage women to create a safe space where both partners feel accepted and valued. We also encourage you not to date men that you feel you need to fix. If you're dating a man right in the beginning and you're like, gosh, he's so good on paper, and if I could just help with these few things, he would be my ideal partner. Even that isn't good, because eventually those same issues that you are not okay with in the beginning can come back to bite you, like they did me in the end. My husband had he had financial issues from the very start. I knew it. It was not something that was acceptable to me. And I entered into a relationship with him thinking he would figure it out and get his act together. And I stayed way longer than I should have. And what happened was, what really the end of the relationship was when we were having an argument about money 13 years later. And this voice in my head said, Lisa, if you had a tape recording of a conversation about money that the two of you had 13 years ago, it would be almost the identical conversation. And I realized that we hadn't gone anywhere. We hadn't evolved. We hadn't grown. This same issue from the very beginning was what did us in the end. And that voice inside of me said, Lisa, you can't do this anymore. It hasn't changed. It's not going to change. And you need to leave. You either need to accept him the way he is and be okay with it, or you need to get out of this. And that's when I left. So you may be, there's this illusion, right, that this man will change. And that if we just have enough of these conversations, that surely something has to give. So, you think that if you just wait a little longer, if you work a little harder, if they make certain promises, it will change. In END, being honest with yourself, holding on to this false hope only keeps you from having true connection. So we encourage our clients to get honest with themselves about what they have done, what they are doing in their relationships, how they're settling from the very beginning, entering into relationships and compromising core values, things that they can't give up, that they shouldn't be trying to give up for relationships just so they can have partners and men in their lives, and then wasting years of their lives with men who will never change and never become the men they truly want. These promises, these lies that you keep telling yourself, they keep you treading water. And they keep you investing energy in a relationship that just isn't progressing. It took me 13 years to get this. And my ex-husband and I, we didn't even have children. We didn't have investments together because he had so many financial issues. I refused to even get a bank account with him. When we parted ways, he went his way, I went my way. And after 13 years, we had no communal property. We signed on the dotted line, and that was it. And my lawyer said to me, she said, after 13 years, you don't even have a joint credit card? And I realized in that moment that some wiser part of me knew not to mingle my funds with his because I never really trusted him. And that was a sad awakening for me after having been with this man for 13 years. So, what needs to change? If you are currently in a relationship like this, or if you've done this in past relationships, the first thing you need to ask yourself is whether you're hiding behind this behavior, this hope, to avoid facing your own fears, to avoid looking at your own life and taking responsibility for what's not working in your life, which is what I know I was doing. My life wasn't working. I felt like we were both on the sinking ship. We were both going down together. And I realized I could only save one of us. I had been trying to save him. And I realized the only person I could save was me, and that he had to figure his stuff out and he had to save himself. So in emotionally naked dating, what we teach is that genuine change must come from within each person and not from external pressure or fixing. You can't fix or change someone else. You have to do the inner work on yourself and then attract a partner who you respect and adore and admire, a partner who elevates you. So you need to date up instead of dating down. So let's look at the cost of treading water, of holding on to hope and trying to fix and change a partner who will never be the partner you're truly looking for. The first thing is there's a tremendous loss of time. You need to reflect, add up the years that you may have spent in conversations and arguments and relationships, talking about fixing things that went nowhere. You might find this surprising, but all I ever did was have conversations with my ex-husband about when things were going to change and what he could do to change, and when was he going to ask his grandmother for that loan he had been talking about for years. When was he going to get work and get jobs and get paid for his photographic assignments? When was he going to start paying the rent and the electricity and for the phone? I spent hours and hours and years of my life having those conversations. I remember at one point I had been keeping track of all the money he owed me. Now, I know that that may sound weird in a relationship, but he was constantly allowing me to pay for things and then saying, well, I'll pay you back, and never did. And so one day he was threatening with me and he said, well, go add it all up and you'll see it's not that much. And I actually went into my room and I sat down in my office and I started to add up all of the money that he had said he would pay me back for. Plane tickets and trips we'd taken and meals and half of the rent and the bills. And it was so much money that I actually got the first and only migraine I've ever had. And it was a genuine migraine, not just a headache. I don't get migraines, but I did that day. I started seeing spinning circles in front of my eyes. I got physically ill and nauseous, and my head was pounding, pounding. It was one of the sickest feelings I've ever had. And it was all because I was facing the music. I was seeing the writing on the wall of how I had been lying and deceiving myself and living on hope and a prayer for 13 years with this man. So all we ever did was have these conversations ad nauseum about how he was going to get his act together and start contributing financially to this marriage. And what may blow your mind is that my husband and I never talk about these things. We never talk about what's wrong in the relationship. I mean, we talk about issues and things that we both need to work on as a couple or things that are happening, but we're not blaming each other or pointing the finger or trying to fix each other. We're both fully committed to making this marriage work and to being whole and complete partners and contributors to every aspect of this relationship. And so there's nothing to talk about because we're both showing up completely and fully as adults. It's a completely different dynamic. In END, emotionally naked dating, we talk about how treading water in life is like putting your life and your heart on hold. And perpetuating this illusion prevents you from stepping into true emotional nakedness and the kind of deep, heartfelt, lasting love and connection that you're looking for, that beautiful, playful, romantic partnership. Because these kinds of conversations and trying to fix and change a partner or allowing your partner to try to fix and change you is the opposite of being loving and supportive and emotionally naked and guardians of each other's souls. So there is an emotional toll that all of this takes on you personally, on your partner, and on the relationship itself. So the frustration and resentment that can build up can be immense. It can be like this huge weight, this dark cloud over everything. Trying to fix your partner can be exhausting. And it can ultimately damage your self-worth because you know you're settling and you're pouring your heart and your hope into something that can't change, that won't change. Holding on to illusions doesn't shield you. It only erodes your confidence and clarity. In emotionally naked dating, facing reality is challenging, but it's empowering. When I took back my power, when I started to take personal responsibility in my relationship, and I stopped focusing on what was wrong with my ex-husband, and I started focusing on the things I could change in myself, that's when I started to grow. That's when I started to find the courage to leave this relationship. So why do we stay in these relationships? Why did I stay in my relationship for 13 years? Well, when you focus on your partner's flaws, it allows you to avoid looking at your own. You don't have to look at yourself. And that's sobering. To have to sit back and ask yourself, why am I settling? I know I'm settling. What am I so afraid of? Am I afraid to be alone? Am I afraid that I never will find love? Am I afraid that this is as good as it may get? Am I afraid to look at myself? Am I afraid to admit that I don't have my own life together? His career isn't so great, but neither is mine. I had a lot to look at when I started to take back my power and when I stepped into taking personal responsibility for myself and I stopped pointing the finger at him and what was wrong with him. And what I started to see was, yeah, there were a lot of things that weren't working in his life, but there were a lot of things that weren't working in mine. And I also realized the ways in which he wasn't getting his act together, how those things were impacting me. He was draining me financially. He was damaging my self-esteem. He was hurting me financially because I could have lived much better. I could have had a much better lifestyle if I wasn't providing for two, if I had a real partner who was at least meeting me in the middle. And it was killing my self-esteem as a woman. I wanted to be treated the way I saw other women being treated. I had to convince myself that I didn't get a gift on Valentine's Day, not because my partner was penniless and didn't care enough to get me a gift, but because he didn't have it to give. And I had to admit to myself that I really wanted those things. I wanted a Valentine's Day gift. I wanted him to do something nice for me, take me on a vacation, surprise me with a beautiful piece of jewelry, take me to a lovely dinner. Did he do the things he could do? Yeah, he cooked a lot. He was an amazing cook. And he made me lovely cards for Valentine's Day and Christmas. But I wanted other things too. I wanted to live the life I was accustomed to living. I wanted to travel in the style that I had been accustomed to traveling in as a child. And I wanted to see my financial future growing, not staying the same or even diminishing. And so it was really taking a toll on me. And I'm sure that this is taking a toll on you. So true growth begins, and this is what we teach in Emotionally Naked Dating. True growth begins when you take an honest look at yourself and you admit to yourself what you've been doing in your past relationships, the choices you made and are making. So as long as two people are in a relationship and they're failing together, there's less pressure to face your own need for growth. And that was the other thing. You know, I looked at my ex-husband and it was like, well, he's not doing so great, so that made it okay for me not to do well. I justified my own lack of success and my own ability to really get ahead in my career as a fashion photographer because he was also failing. We weren't inspiring each other and challenging each other to grow. We were complicit in our failure and we were making it okay to stay where we were and not keep growing. There's a comfort in familiar struggles. So staying in a relationship where you are struggling with things that are familiar to you feels safer than facing the unknown. It was easier for me to stay in a relationship where I was failing than to really have to face my fear of success, my fear of putting myself out there and getting rejected as a photographer. I was terrified of rejection. And in order to succeed in any industry, but especially in something as competitive as being a fashion photographer, I was terrified of that kind of rejection, terrified. So in Emotionally Naked Dating, It is so important to shed the comfort of familiarity. You have to get out and take risks, challenge yourself to grow, get out in the dating world, face rejection from men and reject men, right? It goes on both sides, but you've got to be willing to face your fears, walk through them, and get to the other side and find who you truly are and what you're capable of and who you're capable of attracting. Because only by stepping out of your comfort zone can you experience true intimacy. So, how do we break free of this cycle? How do we stop choosing fixer-uppers, dating down, staying in relationships for years with men who are not what we want, or being the person who's, being fixed, dating a man who is trying to fix us, which doesn't feel good either, by the way, because in those relationships, they erode your self-esteem, because if you're with a narcissist or somebody who's abusing you mentally and emotionally, and you feel not good enough, and you're constantly being badgered, that kills your self-esteem. So how do we break free of these relationship dynamics that are so poisonous, that are so dangerous, and that waste years and years of our precious time? Well, reflecting on your role in your relationship is the first step. So you have to be honest with yourself about the ways that you're contributing to those dynamics, either putting up with narcissistic behavior or being the one who's codependent, who needs to feel needed and is trying to fix and change a partner. And you have to have the courage. And this was one of the biggest things of all for me. In order to get out of my relationship, I had to do the thing that was hardest for me, which was to start to visualize a relationship without my ex-husband. That was almost impossible for me because he was my world. The truth was, I needed him so badly because I was so insecure. And I really did think that if I left him, I was going to wind up alone for the rest of my life. And so I had to start to visualize what my life would look like without him. We were living in Italy at the time. We were trying to make it as fashion photographers. And I had to start just in my imagination to take baby steps and think, okay, I'll buy my ticket home. Where will I go? Will I go back to Los Angeles? Will I go to St. Louis, where my brother was at the time? I decided to go to Santa Fe, New Mexico, where I had been on vacation, a beautiful little town that I had fallen in love with, and rebuild my life there. I spent 3 years in Santa Fe. Now I'm back again. Funny how life works. I went to Santa Fe to get away from a husband, and then I came back to Santa Fe with my husband. So I had to start to visualize what my life would look like and feel what it would feel like to be without him. And one of the most miraculous things that happened when I did that was I started to feel lighter. I started to feel hopeful. I started to see possibilities, because as I realized what were his issues and what were mine, and I started to unburden myself of his issues, I actually began to feel lighter because I could do something about my issues. I was powerless over him and his issues. And so I felt how his issues had been weighing on me and weighing me down. And as I started to imagine a life without him, I started to feel lighter. So another thing that you have to do is shift your focus to self-improvement, So instead of focusing on fixing and changing him, you have to start to focus on self-improvement. And what that means is you have to look at the parts of your life that aren't working. Maybe you have let go of friendships because of the relationship and because you haven't felt good about yourself. Maybe you're not doing the things you love doing. Maybe you love to cook and you want to start taking cooking classes. Maybe you need to start looking at what's going on in your career. When I left my ex-husband, I also ended my career in photography and I began a whole new career, a whole new focus, which was exciting and empowering, where I had felt very disempowered in my career as a photographer. So you have to start making some very powerful shifts, some courageous shifts in your own life that will feel empowering. So in my Emotionally Naked Dating course, we show you how to become independent and develop the kind of self-respect that attracts a healthy partner. And we do this by looking at your past and putting together all the pieces, helping you take responsibility for your part in what didn't work, and setting you up for a whole different kind of relationship going forward. So when you look at these relationships, you have to ask yourself if you were truly fulfilled or if you were clinging to the illusion of change. Facing the truth, even if it's hard, creates a space for a relationship that will align with your true values. So I want to talk about how powerful identifying this issue in my life was and how different my current relationship is. So stepping into a relationship with a man that I admire and respect and who inspires me to grow and be a better person, a man who I look up to and have no desire to change. In fact, I feel it would be the height of arrogance for me to offer unsolicited advice to Benjamin. That's how much I respect him and admire who he is. I feel that that would be the height of arrogance for me to do that. So unless he asks me for my opinion, I don't offer my unsolicited advice and feel that I have any right to try to fix or change him. I encourage him when he's feeling down or lost. I remind him of who he is, but I never, ever try to solve his problems for him. He doesn't do that for me either. Now, I can ask his advice and he will give it, but we don't do that unless we ask each other, well, what do you think? I'd love to really hear your honest thoughts. This doesn't mean we don't hold each other to a higher standard, but here's the thing. I chose a partner who has his life together. And I looked at the ways I was settling in past relationships, and I refused to settle again for those same things. I knew that I had settled. I knew that there were things I didn't like about my ex-husband, but I wanted a relationship so badly that I accepted those things. And I knew that this time going forward, I would not do that again. So what I did was, and this is what we teach in Emotionally Naked Dating, I got clear on what I call my final five, the 5 things I must have in a partner. These are not random things that I pulled out of my hat. I looked at my past relationships, and we put you through a very deep dive in the first month of our course so that you can put all the pieces of your past together. And then I came up with the 5 ways I had settled and that I could not settle again. This is a month-long process that we do with you. So it's not something you can just say, okay, I'm going to look at what I did in the past. I'm going to not do those things again. This is a very powerful and deep process that my clients say, Lisa, this was a game changer. This changed my life. It changed the way I look at the way I date, and it completely transformed what I'm looking for in a man. So I did that in my own life, and you have to have all five. You can't move the needle even a little bit, because if you do, you will be doing what you did in your past and it will not work. You have to put the bar high, you have to set it high, and you have to hold it up there. And that's hard. That is not easy, because you have to be willing to date a lot of men. You have to be willing to go on those dates and sit across from those men and see if they have your final five. And if they're missing even one of them, you have to move on. So that's the foundation of END. Real love doesn't require fixing or changing. It requires getting clear on your final five, admitting to all the ways you've settled in your past relationships, what you've put up with, how you've tried to fix and change your partners, or how you've allowed them to try to fix and change you. And it means getting emotionally naked with yourself about your own self improvement, the work you need to do to attract the kind of partner that you don't feel you have to fix and change, a man who truly inspires you, a man you respect with every cell of your being. That's what I can show you how to do. So please go to lisashield.com, click the button all over the page to watch my free presentation, sign up for a call with a member of my team, and we will show you how we can help you find a true guardian of your soul, a man who meets you on all levels, who inspires you to be a better version of yourself, a man who cherishes and adores you, a man who will be by your side for the rest of your life. Thank you so much for listening. Please come back again. Tell everybody you know about these broadcasts. I love doing them. I love the work I do. I love sharing my message with all of you. And please go to my website, lisashield.com, and learn more about how we can help you get this solved. Enjoy the rest of your day, and please come back and see me again. You can also go on Facebook and join our Facebook group, Finding the Guardian of Your Soul. If you'd like to stay in better touch with us, we would love to have you there. Bye-bye, and we'll see you again next time.